welcome to Matador Memories. Today we are speaking with Scott Andrews and Debbie Martinez-Rambo. Scott Andrews is a professor at the American Indian Studies program at CSUN, as well as a professor of English. He is also the director and faculty advisor for the American Indian Student Association. Deborah Martinez-Rambo is a retired educator, communicator, and artist. She has worked at Phillips Graduate University and has worked as an elementary school principal. Both of you, thank you for making it to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting.
And today I want to talk about kind of the history of the powwow celebrations here, or the powwow event here at CSUN. But I kind of wanted to start with the history of American Indians at CSUN. Now, I know that the land that CSUN lies on is part of the territory that belonged to the Fernando Tataviam Band of Mission Indians. Do you think you guys could go into their history a little bit?
So the Fernando Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, their tribal administration office is over in San Fernando. Mm-hmm. And that's why that name that they have is because they were associated with the mission of San Fernando. And you find that consistent in California, where tribes kind of got renamed, or at least named by the dominant culture according to which mission they were associated with. And that association has a lot of negative connotations, in that sometimes it was forced labor, forced relocation to live at the mission or where the mission was, etc. And so you see increasingly more tribes, I think, are moving away from that naming, right? They don't want necessarily the mission to be part of their name. They want the name in their language. If you look at the area of Southern California for California natives, pre-contact with the Spanish or the Americans or the Russians, it was a series of villages. It was densely populated. California was a really densely populated part of the continent before colonization, and many villages throughout. And so some of those villages show up in place names like Tahunga. I think means the place of the old woman. I think in the language, Malibu is a Chumash word, or derived from a Chumash word. You see these names, Cahuenga, any of those place names that end in unga, that's going to be an indigenous word. That's a suffix that means like the place of something.
As well as Pacoima. Pacoima is where the sun rises.
Right. So these place names are throughout Southern California and throughout the San Fernando Valley in this area. And so if you were to talk to the Tataviam people, that even that appellation of Tataviam, that's not something really they used for themselves before contact. They didn't have a word for you really were from villages, and that's where you traced your family line through. And when you talk to, what I've been impressed by with my interaction with Tataviam people is how much they know about their ancestry and how much they can tell you, well, my mom's line comes through that village, and my grandfather's line comes through that other village, and they know all the different villages where they were and the histories of the families that come through them. So there's a lot of intermarriage. We talk about, in this area, we talk about the Tataviam. We're on Tataviam land. But just south of us a little bit is Tongva, indigenous people of Los Angeles, the Tongva, or just to our west, the Chumash. So there's a lot of intermarriage among all those groups. So it gets a little fuzzy sometimes about where somebody's territory begins or ends. And when the land acknowledgement statement that the university developed in consultation with the Tataviam, I would usually give a little history lesson with it, because it mentions the Sesevunga, which is really Porter Ranch. Where Porter Ranch was a village, Sesevunga, which means the place of the sycamores. And so the people who are from that place are the Sesevitam. And so our land acknowledgement acknowledges the Sesevitam, the people of Sesevunga, and their descendants, some of whom became Tataviam, right? So we sort of go through this history lesson. Where CSUN is, there wasn't a village. The valley, San Fernando Valley, was kind of a open territory. Not many trees here back then. It was hunting territory. And there's not really a water source near CSUN, so there'd be no reason to have a village here. But so that gives a little bit of when I do the land acknowledgement, I give a little bit of that history. The California Native people were village-based, town-based. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, and when my ancestors lived in the Southeast, North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, South Carolina, it was the same for us. We were town-based. We weren't a nation in the way we think of nations now. Each town was autonomous. Each town made its own decisions. And so that political system had to transform to interact with a country as big as the United States or a country as big as Spain or Mexico. Native people had to adapt to that concept of a nation. So that may be more than you wanted to hear, but
That's perfect. Thank you. And you had mentioned like the land acknowledgement that CSUN has for the Tataviam. When did that start, and what has the school kind of been doing to acknowledge the Tataviam?
A few years ago, when Diane Harrison was still president of the university, I wrote her. They approached me about what can we do for land acknowledgement, and I asked them, well, hold off. I'm working on something. And so I had been talking to Rudy Ortega Jr., who is the president of the Tataviam, and about what can we do for land acknowledgement. So it's just more than a statement that we make at different ceremonies, so that we're actually doing something on campus. And so I worked with Rudy and Mark Villasenor, who's a CSUN graduate, former student of mine, who's vice president for the Tataviam. And I also talked to Pamela Villasenor, Mark's sister, who's also a CSUN graduate, and who right now is the executive president for Puku, which is their social cultural services branch of the tribe. And so we talked, and we figured out several projects that the university could do. The art mural that just got debuted in the library was one of those things. Let's have a mural that acknowledges CSUN's existence on Tataviam land and in the history of the Tataviam, so that students, when they're studying, can see this. I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, and I have a lot of fond memories of the library at OU and all the history that it embodied. And so I wanted students who study in the CSUN library to come away with something similar. They'll remember that mural for years to come. They'll possibly be able to remember how to pronounce Tataviam, and they'll know the people who were here. We also proposed indigenous plant zones on campus, like area for deergrass, area for sage, things like that. That hasn't happened yet, partly because the Nat Zappia, who was the director for the Center for Sustainability on campus, passed away very suddenly. And he was working on that project with Jesus Alvarez, who's a Tataviam citizen and Tataviam senator, but also one of the employees, one of the officers in the financial aid office on campus, right? And he's a plant guy. If you talk to Jesus, you go to his house, it's like a jungle in his backyard. He knows all about Southern California plants. He's a plant guy, and so he and Nat were working on that. That's kind of taken a step back with Nat's passing. Some naming on campus of maybe a building, we haven't done that yet, and a fee waiver to try to get a fee waiver for Tataviam citizens. That hasn't happened directly. What we've done instead so far is work with Bridge to the Future, which is a program that works with Canoga Park High School and brings in a cohort of Canoga Park High School students who get a fee waiver for their 4 years at CSUN. And so we've worked with them to recruit Native students. The Tataviam have an office called the Education and Cultural Learning Department, where they do a lot of tutoring for Native students in Los Angeles County, not just Tataviam citizens, but just Native students. And so we recruit students from that to kind of join that cohort. So they don't have to be Tataviam citizens, but it's a Native student who's entered and gets a fee waiver for their time at CSUN. And so there's been 2 or 3 students who've come through that way in the last couple of years. So those are the 4 major things that we proposed. And a couple of them are sort of happening, and a couple of them are still in process. And then there was the statement that the Tataviam more or less wrote for us. I asked them, how do you guys want to be acknowledged? How do you want us to honor you? And so they wrote that for us. Mm-hmm. I'd like to hear from Debbie. Was at CSUN before people talked about land acknowledgements, and what was it like when you were here, Debbie, as a student? And was the university reluctant to acknowledge Native students? Did you have to make a lot of noise, or did they want? How cooperative were they making your presence known?
What was exciting was being at the beginning of when the students American Indian Student Association began. And I came in 71, spring of 71, and we had that year 3 American Indian students who graduated as a senior. So I got to overlap with them one semester. And when I came in, there was actually a big recruiting program for American Indian students. And we ended up with an EOP advisor who became our mentor, our advisor. And there were 22 of us that she actually was able to recruit. And we had, when I went through, and I graduated in 1975 with my bachelor's degree. At that time, we had 22 American Indian students. The majority of them were from 5 different states and from different various reservations. But we actually had 2 student recruiters. One was my sister, and then the other was Bill Gibbons. And they both were recruiters for Cal State Northridge as students. And they'd go out to different states, different high schools, to Sherman Institute, to Riverside, to the Indian School, high school, to recruit students. So we were extremely active. And at the time, because it was the end of all of the moratoriums and everything that we held through EOP and recruiting African American, Asian, Chicano students on campus, we also got included in that along with Hawaiian students. And so I think it was just a perfect time for us to be able to get students from different diversities on the campus. And so we actually had, along with the Chicano house, we had an Indian house also.
Where was that?
That was over by where the Chicano house is now. Oh, I know. It was where the student, where the preschool is
Okay.
on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, that was where the old houses were. And so we actually had that before we were given that house. And that house we were given, I'm going to say in 73, if I remember correctly, maybe 74. In 74, because in 71, 72, 73, we used to have to meet in Sister Grace's office.
It was just an office?
Yeah, just an
Wow.
office.
So-
We'd all cram in there. And
Debbie, tell Matthew really quick who Sister Grace was.
Sister Grace Ann Rabidou was Chippewa, and she was actually a nun who happened to be picked up by Cal State Northridge to be the American Indian EOP advisor and person that we would go to for EOP. I wasn't an EOP student, but I participated in everything that they had.
When you talk to the students from that era, Sister Grace is kind of an iconic figure.
Yeah, she is. She was
really
like a mother to all of us. And
Yeah.
she just, because so many of the students were from other states and from reservations, many of them had not even been off of their reservations. And so she was a real big help in creating a community amongst us. And so, like for Thanksgiving, since I came from Pacoima in the San Fernando Valley, I'd have all the students come over for Thanksgiving to be able to have family together.
That's great.
And so we had that communication going. And my ex-husband was one of the students also at the time. And he's Paiute and Shoshone from Big Pine. And he became the director of United American Indian Involvement. Well, he created United American Indian Involvement and had been the director of the Indian Center when it was on Washington Boulevard in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
In 74.
United American Indian Involvement, Matthew, you'll hear referred to as UAII. It'll get shortened to the acronym. And it's in downtown Los Angeles. And it's kind of a social services, education, programming. Do they still have a continuation high school at UAII?
Yes, they do. And they have the health program now.
Yeah. And so it's just a lot of, if you're not in any country, you don't really know what UAII is, but it's real important and it has a long history in Los Angeles doing a lot of important work. And
actually, a lot of the indigenous people who come from reservations know UAII because Dave was on the government health program to start mental health and physical health programs on the different reservations.
Yeah.
And so they all knew Dave Rambo's name and knew that he came from UAII to help start all of the different reservation health centers that they have on the different reservations.
Yeah, honestly, some of what Debbie's telling me is news to me because I didn't know we had an Indian house back then. I didn't know that we had a space on campus. I'm jealous of what she's talking about with EOP having so many resources devoted to recruiting Native students, because now we don't have that, and we've been not that EOP is great. I love Shiva Parsa. She's the head of EOP. She's a really good friend to American Indian Studies. EOP helps fund the tutors that we supply to the Tataviam to help with their after school program, all of that. But we don't have an EOP. EOP stands for what? Educational Opportunity Program.
Right, correct.
We don't have an EOP advisor devoted to Native students. We had one for a while that was like half devoted, and he passed away, but we haven't been able to get them to devote those resources to have someone whose their sole job is to go to the high schools once they're here, advise them, keep them here, etc. Because Native American people make up like 1% of the whole population of the United States, but far less than 1% of the college population. Right. And so they're underrepresented in that regard. And having resources in EOP would be wonderful. I'm jealous of that era that Debbie's talking about.
And actually, at the ACE American Indian Program board meetings, we've been discussing that and the importance of what that plays in recruiting more American Indian students on campus. So the last two monthly meetings, we've discussed it.
So what Debbie's referring to is she's on the like an advisory board for the American Indian Studies program. She's one of the community members. Are you an alumni or a community member or both? Sort of what's
both kind of.
And so the current director is Teresa Williams-Leone. I was director for about a decade, and I'm in the process of retiring. And Teresa Williams-Leone, when she came in, she kind of expanded the board to more consciously include community members and alumni, et cetera. And so Debbie's always been a friend to me and helped me with the powwow and other things, but I didn't have that official role for her. And so Teresa and her wisdom created this kind of official role for Debbie and some others, which is great, which is wonderful. It was a great idea. I should have done it a long time ago.
I did want to ask, actually, you had mentioned the powwow. How did that get started? Because obviously later the American Indians program started, and then I believe the powwow, the annual event started happening because of that. Can you guys tell me how that started and how it's kind of evolved? It's still happening to this day.
In 78, at that time, I was getting my first master's degree there on campus at CSUN in education, elementary, in bilingual cross-cultural education. And so I was still an active student. And at that time, we decided to do a powwow, but it was not a powwow for the community as much as an exhibition powwow is what we called it. And we invited, UAII sponsored it with us. No, I'm sorry. The Indian Center of Los Angeles.
Southern California Indian Center, or?
The Los Angeles.
Okay.
The one that was on Washington, because that was Dave's last year as the director of the LA Indian Center. And so they sponsored it along with UCLA, who had another alumni from Cal State Northridge. And so he agreed to bring dancers because they had, following how we recruited, he did a fabulous job at UCLA recruiting American Indian students. And so they had a troupe of about 5 dancers that would go out and do exhibition dancing at different locations. So they agreed to come out, and we held it, which is really funny because in front of the Oviatt Library was grass at the time. I think they had just opened. I'm not sure. I don't quite remember, but they had opened already, Oviatt Library. But in front of Richfield, and we used to just call them the Sierra Hall buildings at that time. And so when the Richmond building name came up, it was like, where is that? I said, we're in front of where the elevator is of the Sierra Hall building, because in there was the Chicano Studies Department. And so they worked very closely and supported us as American Indian students. And we were able to cross different program requirements to be able to get our minors and majors classes into them. And so we ended up having one day, all day, starting in the morning until about 5 o'clock at night, a powwow. And that's where the birth started. And then from there, we went to the field out off of Zelza, where the gym is now, the new, I don't know what you call it. But
Oh, the
then
SRC. The SRC, yeah. Oh, and then they also have the soccer field like across from it, yeah.
Right. Well, that was all grass. And so we held a 2-day powwow out there.
Wow.
And I know that you had mentioned Tony Hawk, and it had been years since I heard Tony's name when you mentioned him earlier, Scott. But that's where we held the powwow and had a 2-day over Mother's Day. So it was considered a Mother's Day powwow for 2 days, Saturday and Sunday.
She's referring to Tony Littlehawk, who's a dancer, not Tony Hawk the skateboarder, but Tony Littlehawk,
oh, no, Tony
the
Littlehawk.
fancy dancer. And a little bit of what Debbie's talking about is the powwow has been much traveled on campus, right? Yes. The first event that she was talking about was held there in Sierra Quad, right, in the central part of campus, and then she talked about them moving over to what is now the Student Recreational Center, et cetera. When the powwow went dormant for a while in the 90s, and then it was revived by a set of students around 2002, and we held it where the Soroya Performing Arts Center is now, right?
Correct.
And then we moved over to what is the Orchard, right? The what was called the Faculty Club.
Correct.
and then we moved up to north side of campus, across from the Chicano House and what is now the Central American Studies, American Indian Studies Community Center. We call it La Casita. It's the little house, right? Now that's we keep getting sort of moved as they build a new building. We have to move the powwow to a different place. And now the powwow is back where it began, right? Okay. Now it's back in the quad where it first began. And when we first started looking for a space to have it, I went to the dean and I said, look, you guys keep kicking us out of wherever we have the powwow. And she says, well, we would like to have it back in the heart of campus again, where the first one was. And so that's hopefully our permanent home is there in the quad. It'd be nice to maybe have it at the athletic fields because of the lighting, et cetera. But I like having it right in the heart of campus too. It's a nice message, right?
Mm-hmm. I think for a little bit we even went out to the Devonshire Downs.
Oh wow! Okay,
if I remember correctly.
So Matthew may not know there used to be a horse track here in San Fernando Valley. Devonshire Downs was a horse race.
Oh wow.
Here in I've never seen it, but I've never seen pictures of it. I still want to get pictures of that Indian house that Debbie was talking about. We need to get some find some pictures of that.
Of course. I wanted to ask because you said when it was the first powwows, it was more like you said exhibitionist
Correct.
Type
it was
of
called
event.
An exhibition powwow.
Yeah. How did it kind of evolve? Because as Scott was telling me, I think the last time we talked, it became kind of a way for a lot of American Indians from all over LA County to just come together, because they're spread out across, Los Angeles County. Was that kind of a surprise to see so much more people come, or was it something that kind of you guys figured out like, yeah, we should be, I guess, attracting as many people as we can?
I imagine that first one was for students, wasn't it, Debbie?
Oh.
Not really for the community.
Was for students and family and inclusive to the entire CSUN community. So we had a lot of spectators and people who came to watch, and we had a lot of students actually who participated who weren't Indigenous. And then, of course, all of the 22 of us and all our families, because many of the students who were there, we actually married into each other, and some came married already and had kids, which was kind of neat because we did have families that were also. But I think it came out of in 1970. Los Angeles Indian Center actually held. No, I'm lying. I'm sorry. In 72, my second semester, they actually held their first powwow in the Los Angeles area. Powwows have been a big part of the indigenous communities for all nations for years. And at that time, it was because of the Religious Act prior to 76, wasn't it, Scott?
The
Religious
American
Act?
Indian Religious Freedoms Act.
Right. And that allowed us to be able to come from out from hiding to be able to practice playing the drums, to be able to practice dancing again and things. Before that, we had to hide in the mountains or go way away from where anyone could hear the drums. And so in other cities, they had started powwows. We started our powwow here in Los Angeles in 72, and that was actually the head woman dancer for Los Angeles powwow was one of our students, Nancy Herod, who was from Oklahoma. She was Cheyenne and Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho from Norman, Oklahoma. And she was one of our students. And so when we were talking with Sister Grace and in the office, we were saying, well, why don't we hold a real powwow, not just exhibition, so that we can start meeting on campus? And that's how we first started talking about the powwow being held on campus. And it's for us to come together. It's the way our families have been able to survive in Los Angeles with the diversity of different nations that are represented from all over the states. And so we hold honorings during the time. We hold different ceremonies, introducing our new babies, praying over someone who may be ill in the Indian community. And so it's a way of our families gathering and getting to know each other's kids and being examples for everyone to be able to learn to dance or drum or other cultural aspects of the community.
And what do you expect? What can people expect to see when they come to the CSUN powwow? Just want to cover some basics of like what happens at the powwow. Well,
first off, you get to eat fry bread. We always have booths that sell the fry bread, and different vendors that sell different, from clothes to jewelry to something that you can use in your office or home. And so we have the vendors, and then we have, of course, our drummers and our dancers who come. You'll have an MC who actually does all the announcing, allowing people to know what's going on in the circle, reminding them to get out and take a look at what the vendors have to offer. And
like Randy Pico, he's our MC. He's a great guy from up north, but his tribe is down here, San Manuel. He's from that area, but he works up at Livermore in Northern California. But he comes down for the holidays, so we have him as our MC, and he does a great job of just like describing the dance that's being done right now. Here's the history of the jingle dress. Here's what a fancy dancer does, just to tell the crowd. Like, so some of the powwow is educational for the non-native people. The powwow is educational. Learn the history of the dances, and one of our goals, of course, is to demonstrate to people who don't know already that Native people exist and flourish today and have families and lives and are important parts of our community today, right now, not in the past, not in a history book, not in an old movie, but right now. And so it's educational in that way. But the MC's job is to let people know what dance is being done now, when it's okay for anybody to dance, when it's okay to take pictures and not take pictures, all that sort of educational stuff that happens for the non-native audience, but also for the native. Some native people haven't grown up within a heritage, and so they come to powwows looking for that, looking for fellow native people to learn more about their own past or learn about their history, their heritage. So some of that happens too, and that's important function of a powwow is to bring in new Native members to the community, especially if they're new to Los Angeles or they're just new to their heritage. They didn't know their heritage before. It can serve that function too.
Right. And then we also have bird singers who are indigenous to the Southwest, and they actually sing with a rattle. And so, like, one of our opening parts of the powwow is the bird singers from Rudy's, from the San Fernando group, that come and actually do the morning blessing through song, greeting everyone and welcoming them.
So the powwow is not indigenous to California.
Right.
The powwow comes from the plains, the Kiowa in Oklahoma and Texas,
Right.
And then it sort of moves around the plains. And so a lot of the music styles and the clothing styles that you'll see in the arena are mostly plains style regalia and plain style music. But bird songs is a California thing. The bird songs tell the stories of the creation of the world, and bird songs will go all night. Certain bird songs will just last all night as you're telling stories of the creation, or different events, etc. So it took a while. My impression is it took a while to get the California Native people to participate in powwows because it wasn't their thing for so long. They had they had festivities that were built around the mission calendar,
Right.
and so. It even took us a while for me to convince the Tavium to come on a regular basis and participate in our powwow, because they would say, we're not powwow people. That's not our thing. And I said, yeah, but you need to, we're part of your community. You can come in. So now Rudy and Mark and Rudy's sons come out and they sing for us and they do the blessing. You'll see bear dancers, Chumash people in the arena wearing their regalia, not Western style regalia, but they're dancing with clappers, these wooden clappers that you make a rhythmic music with. So you'll see California powwows have, in the last decade or so, have more sort of seriously integrated California Native traditions into the powwow. And so for me, that's an important development. And to include that because this is their land. And I know the powwow may have seemed foreign at one point, but it was brought here to Los Angeles partly because there was so much relocation of Native people through the federal relocation program, where people were coerced to move from Oklahoma and other places to Los Angeles for jobs, but those jobs rarely materialized in the way they'd been promised. And so powwow became this intertribal way to get together and to be with people who understand you and get you and know your family story and know your history, etc. And so the powwow arrived in Los Angeles in probably the 50s or the 60s is when it would have begun, mostly by what we would call diasporic Native people who had been removed from their homelands to California.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because I remember you had described it as just like essentially a pan-tribal event where it just, it's a mixing of.
And you can go to other parts of the country where it's not necessarily pan-tribal. You can go to Crow Fair, where that's really those local tribes. That's their thing, and they're going to speak that language and have those songs, and it's that community's powwow. If you go up north to First Nations people in Canada, their events are more like, this is a tribal event. This is not a pan-tribal. This is a tribal event.
Okay.
In California, it's mostly, like I said, pan-tribal. I think when you and I visited earlier, Matthew, we talked about a movie called The Exile.
Yes.
Which filmed around 59 to 61 or so by a student at UCLA. And he followed around some primarily Navajo or Dene people who had been relocated to Los Angeles and sort of wrote down their story and then wrote a film about it. And so that kind of tells their story about being located to a part of LA that's not there anymore. Bunker Hill used to be a lot of Victorian-style tenement houses, and those were all apartments that Native people lived in. And you go down, there's a really cool scene where one of the women is walking through Grand Market. What's the market downtown called?
Grand Central Market?
Grand Central Market. I always want to call it Grand Street Market, but Grand Central Market. That's from that era. You see her walking through that, doing her shopping, etc. So you see this moment in LA when that was an Indian part of town. And it's not anymore. Now it's a bunch of high rises and things. But that's that moment when the powwow starts to arrive here, is with that population. It's kind of to me it's kind of a sad movie, but it's an important movie in that it documents this moment in history of Los Angeles history.
Right. Exactly.
And that also is why the LA Indian Center was downtown.
Yeah.
And also UAII started on Winston, which was downtown, because the Skid Row area is the second place that Indians ended up being, which is why we're called urban Indians, because it was really urbanized there downtown. And then in the 60s and 70s, late 60s, 70s, the majority of the natives that came from their different tribal nations were more in the Alvarado Echo Park area. And then several did land here in the San Fernando Valley, which is why we've always been involved. But that's because the Tatavian group that's out here has always in San Fernando opened up their community for indigenous people coming into and finding a home.
Just and one thing I would say real quick for your listeners, Matthew, is there's a book called Reimagining Indian Country, which is by Nicholas Rosenthal, and it's a history of that arrival of Native people into Los Angeles and those first social programs, education programs, et cetera. He spoke at CSUN one year, and I asked him about the arrival of the Powwow, and he said, that's the chapter we cut.
Really?
Is the arrival of the Powwow to Los Angeles. So I've yet to find out if he's published it somewhere else. But it's a really good introduction.
Why?
Yeah, it's a really good introduction to how that population came to Los Angeles in their early lives, whether it was working as stunt people in Hollywood or the different
Which many did. Right.
The different social groups they had to form, right, to try to hold their communities together. What's interesting about the book too is, and interesting and sad, is how little there is about Native Californians in the book, right? That Native California population got really overwhelmed by the diasporic population, the population that got removed here.
Oh, okay. Everyone coming
they kind of get erased. And so that book doesn't really have that much about Chumash and Tongva and Tatavian people and Ashaman people, et cetera, Ohlone people. It doesn't have that much in there, but which is sort of tells that story too of, well, they got overwhelmed by all these Native people from elsewhere in the United States. But it's a good book. It's a good book.
Absolutely. I'd love to put a graphic of it for the viewers. And I just wanted to ask, how is CSUN continuing to, I guess, acknowledge the Native American tribes in our area? And do you see other schools doing similar things, other universities?
Well, I mean, the biggest powwows in California are at the casinos.
Oh, okay, I see.
The next biggest powwows in California are at the universities. And it's hard. There are powwows in Los Angeles County that are not university based. The UAI does one now. The Native American, the NAI, I forget what the acronym is, but the Los Angeles County Commission for American Indian People, they have a powwow, et cetera. But the biggest ones are at the campuses now. That's an important function for these universities to serve, I think, is to it's really expensive to put on a powwow, and for insurance reasons only. Well, campuses have blanket insurance policies, so that makes campuses a great place to have a powwow because it cuts down on the costs. But it also gives a focus for the students. So, like I said, ours went dormant for a while, and students revived it, and so I'm glad they did, and hopefully we keep it going forever.
Of course.
It's the big powwow in the San Fernando Valley. UCLA has one. Stanford has a really big one. I assume UC Berkeley has one. I don't know, because they have a big Native Studies program. But hopefully it continues. Now, what we did at UC Riverside, where I got my graduate degree, is their powwow coincided with also a Medicine Ways conference where they had a day of presentations, and I would like to see that kind of develop at CSUN, perhaps, where we have not just the powwow, but also programming and things for the community and educational stuff that kind of coincides with the powwow, because it needs to evolve, it needs to change with the times and the people, and Debbie can talk about bringing new people into the arena. The young people aren't dancing as much as they did in the past.
Oh,
And so
really?
sometimes we have a hard time finding a new head boy or a new head girl because they're just not doing it as much. So it becomes important to kind of bring new people into the circle. And so she can talk about that, about how it could evolve or what it needs to do to stay alive, in a sense. The powwow needs to stay as a living thing.
Yeah, what are the steps to have it keep evolving and to just keep it alive, a tradition?
A lot of that is the community coming together to provide programs to teach our students, student age, elementary, middle school, high school students, how to dance, what the music is, what the different styles of dancing are. And I think that the various community programs are doing that. They've been doing it for about 20 years now, offering drumming and dancing. For instance, UAII, along with Orange County Indian Center, has provided drumming and dancing at the Gene Autry Museum one night a week. And then the next night they take it further south to the Los Angeles area, Anaheim area. And so I know that they just started a class this past week through Riverside. And I know that they're providing that for young people there. And so it's really nice to see so many kids coming out. And everyone's welcome. You don't have to be Indigenous to want to learn how to do that. But we really are trying to provide that in the community for our youth, to encourage them, to teach them, because it's embarrassing for any young person to have to get out in front of a million people and dance.
Right,
Even if it's
right.
25 people, I've got to get out there and do what?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, starting my grandkids, my older one and three in the middle, they all did it, but they were a group. So they felt, they had company to do it. My youngest granddaughter, who's 8 years old, she got out there in the beginning of the circle. She danced and she was fine, but there were three other little girls. When it came to asking for the category dancers, she didn't want to go out because she was the only little fancy shawl dancer. And she started crying, I don't want to go out alone, and so it really is encouraging them to come out also and not be so shy. So we need to work on that. But a lot of that got stunted with unfortunately, with COVID and the pandemic. And so, just encouraging them to know themselves more and to feel self-confident.
Right.
And then as we've talked about before, Matthew, the idea that the native population in Los Angeles is really spread out. And so there'll be so Title VI is the American Indian Education Program in the LAUSD. And so there'll be so they know where all the native kids are, let's say in a high school. There'll be one kid in one high school and one kid in another high school. So that's not real reinforcing of community identity, et cetera, if you're the only or one of two or three kids at a school. And so it's also hard to put together a cultural program for that school because there's just three students there. So it's harder to get them all together. So what Debbie's talking about with UAII and those others, now we can get 10 kids together, and it's easier to get 10 kids to dance than one kid to dance, right? The Tatabium, for a while, were holding powwow dance classes and drumming classes at Rudy Ortega Senior Park, right? And so I don't know that they're doing that still, but those are real important ways to get, the kids to figure out there's other kids like me. That's real important. B, for them to learn, these are some of the traditions of my heritage, and I can still do these things. And then it's fun, like this year, Glenn Begay and Maxine, their son came out into the circle for the first time. That is, it was his first time to dance in regalia at a powwow. So it's kind of like a christening almost, where he comes out, all the men came out and honored him, et cetera. So those are real important events for us, but also for that kid and that family when they're brought into the circle for the first time.
Right.
And hopefully they stay. Hopefully they find it important and reinforcing, and they become the elders in a few decades that are bringing their kids into the circle.
Right, of course. And I just wanted to ask one real quick question. When are the powwows usually hosted every year?
Ours is, so far as the last decade or so, has been the Saturday after Thanksgiving. California is blessed with good weather year round, so you can almost find a powwow every weekend of the year if you look hard enough. You can. If you go to other parts of the country, that's not the truth. It's too hot in the summer to dance, or it's too cold in the winter to dance. If you go up to Canada, they have a lot of events inside a gym. Right, they'll have their big round dances because it's too cold to be outside dancing, so you're inside dancing. Their window for outside powwow is kind of narrow if you're in Manitoba or Saskatchewan. Southern California, we can dance any weekend of the year almost. Right.
And we start January, that first New Year's. We have a New Year's powwow up in Fresno, and that kicks off every almost. I think there's only about 3 months that don't have one going on somewhere in California every weekend.
Yeah. So ours has always been, for the last 10 years or so has been the Saturday after Thanksgiving. Partly because it's hard to find an open weekend. You got to hunt for a weekend because you don't want to step on somebody's toes and have two powwows scheduled on the same weekend in the same county, right? So we found that window. It was good for us. It's been working for us. If we move it, it'll be with a lot of careful consideration because you start to get associated with a certain date. And CSUN's gotten associated with it being the Thanksgiving powwow. The biggest university powwow is Long Beach's.
Long Beach.
And that's usually in March, isn't it, Debbie?
Right. In the Los Angeles area. Yes.
Yeah.
And, they're the biggest, and then UCLA holds the next largest. And Riverside has really been growing because of Morongo.
Right.
And
so Riverside's near a casino, and also there's near reservations. The Cal State San Bernardino and UC Riverside are near. There's no reservations in Los Angeles County, so that means there's no concentration of a community. Our neighbors, the Tataviam, they're in the process of seeking federal acknowledgement, and hopefully that happens in the next few years. And if that happens, they'll be the first federally recognized group in Los Angeles County, and possibly get a reservation. I don't know if they've looked at some land, and I don't know if it's really within the borders. It may be just north of us in the next county, but we're really rooting for them, right? That they get this acknowledgement that really should have happened a long time ago because they signed a treaty in the 1850s that got legitimately just waylaid. Somebody stole it, hid it in a drawer because California people didn't want California natives to get reservations. So the Treaty of Fort Tejon was hidden for a long time, and that's the treaty that the Tataviam signed that just never got ratified by Congress because some Californians hid it. And so hopefully that'll happen for them as they'll get federal recognition.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to thank you both for coming in and talking about the history of the powwows and the American Indian presence here on CSUN. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.